Let's begin this afternoon focusing on the crisis in Ukraine. Over the weekend, there were a number of developments that have dramatically shifted the geopolitical landscape in the country. Now, most of the attention has centered around the southern peninsula of Crimea. For the latest from that region, let's turn straight to RT's Egor Piskunov.
The tendency that we've been witnessing the past few days here in the Crimea continued on Monday as more and more now former Ukrainian troops pledged allegiance to local Crimean authorities. And the latest in that sense was a whole base of the Air Force equipped with lots of different types of aviation, including 45 MiG-29 jet fighters and around 800 personnel. And all of them pledged their allegiance to local authorities, saying they won't follow what they call are illegal orders from the self-appointed government in Kiev. And basically they just became an addition to the other Crimean security services, including the police, the military, the Navy, border guards, and even emergency services, which have basically said the same. And it's not even only about those who were stationed and in service here before the uprising in Kiev. Some of those who were appointed by the new authorities have also now said or vowed that they will only take orders from local authorities, including the now former commander-in-chief of Ukraine's Navy fleet. What we're seeing in the rest of the country is perhaps the trust or the support within the military of the new government in Kiev is declining as well, since there are reports that several special force units rejected the orders to march on the Crimea. Also, Kiev is now trying to recruit reserve servicemen, but apparently that's not been going very well, since by Monday morning only around 1.5% of these reserves showed up actually.
Igor, can you go ahead and walk us through some of the developments that played out over the weekend?
Well, the biggest news over the weekend was definitely Russia's upper house of parliament giving the legal green light for the deployment of a limited amount of Russian troops here in the Crimea, after being asked for assistance from local authorities who were, well, being worried about threats coming from the new authorities, many of whom are right-wing radicals. And this news, I must say, here on the ground was greeted with applause by the locals, since basically we've been here the entire week and we've been witnessing these pro-Russian rallies taking place all across this city, and we are in the capital of the Crimea. But of course it did spark a lot of criticism from the international community, especially from the West. We're hearing threats from the United States about economic isolation, about social isolation, travel sanctions, and so on. So that is, of course, quite a worrying factor. But in general, compared to the events in Kiev last week, or over a week ago now, the situation here is very calm. In fact, the streets are patrolled by the so-called self-defense squads. Most of the military bases and artillery are now under the complete control of local authorities, and that all happened without a single shot fired. So that is definitely a good sign, because no one wants any bloodshed in here.
Last week, you were being fired on in Kiev, watching those very violent demonstrations kind of play out. What is it like being in Crimea? Do you feel safe as a journalist?
Well, I do feel safe as a journalist right now, especially compared to what we saw in Kiev, since initially we were just going there to film protests. Personally, I never expected that the violence would reach that level and that scale, since, well, I wasn't targeted personally, but some of the people that we are still here with, our crew members, were, including even the cameraman who's filming this live report right now, because at first we were just watching the events unfold on Independence Square in Kiev. Pretty much this revolution happened on the palm of our hands, or at least that visually it was almost the same. But then at some point everything just changed, and our hotel just ended up in the center of this whole thing, and had bullets fly inside. The cameraman was trying to film what was happening outside, and he has it on video how a bullet just goes a little bit lower, ricochets off the wall, and chunks of the wall just fly off. Thankfully, he wasn't injured. Another cameraman had a bullet ricochet off the wall onto his vest, which was damaged even, but thankfully he wasn't injured. So it was quite a hasty situation there. And of course, compared to all that, this is almost like, I don't know, like, well, it's not, I don't want to be making any jokes here, but this is really calm, and this is almost like a vacation in that sense compared to what we've been seeing there. But that is another reason why the locals were so concerned. They don't want these buses with radicals just drive into town here, throwing around Molotov cocktails, setting things on fire, setting police on fire, shooting AK-47s, and so on. So right now, knowing that most of the key facilities, the strategic facilities, the government buildings, just the streets even, are being patrolled by these self-defense squads who are really friendly with the locals. In fact, I'm sure that you've probably seen these pictures yourselves. The locals have been taking photographs with these troops just on the streets, on the streets, with children smiling, and in general, it is a friendly atmosphere right now. The big issue is now what's going to happen next, not only here in the Crimea and possibly not even only in Ukraine, but in the whole region, perhaps even in the whole world, because clearly the events and this whole situation which is happening in this country right now is going to have consequences definitely on this whole neighborhood, on this whole region, in Europe, and possibly in the relations between Russia and the US, Canada, Japan, and so on. This is truly a significant story, and for me as a journalist, of course, it's very interesting to be working on it, and I guess it's vital for me just to see everything with my own eyes, because there's so much misinformation being spread right now.
That was RT correspondent Egor Piskunov on the ground in Ukraine, and you can follow his reporting on Twitter at Egor Piskunov _RT.